Test 1, 2. Hey everybody, Brian here. Just started recording and now I'm going to start streaming live to Facebook. All right, hey everybody. It's Brian here with Kalo Services. Thanks for joining me. This is truly a live video. This is not pre-recorded. And this is specifically for some of the issues that we're facing right at this moment. We obviously have a crisis we're all well aware of, and now the governor has just issued a stay-at-home warning or a stay-at-home requirement for anybody other than those who work in what they're calling essential industries or essential services. At Kalos, we are an essential service. People need air conditioning, and we're part of that, so we're going to continue working and continue providing that service. We are going to take every precaution possible, in addition to the obvious hand washing and not coming to work if you're sick and checking your temperature and all those sorts of things. We're also going to begin wearing gloves and masks and eye protection in the home in order to make sure that we're not acting as I think the scientific term is as a vector for the spread of this horrible virus. So today's presentation is not only specifically about what we know about COVID-19, but it's also just an overview of home health. I want to be very, very conscientious of the fact that we have a crisis going on. This is not an opportunity for us to sell products. It's only a service, so that way you can know what's going on in your home and what you can do about it, and hopefully make good decisions for yourself and your family. So let's get started. First off, important note. Always follow the recommendations of the CDC, World Health Organization, EPA, Florida Health Department, and OSHA as applicable. This presentation comes from the perspective of an experienced air conditioning contracting company and educator in the air conditioning space, but that doesn't mean that you should follow my advice or the advice of Kalo Services or HVAC School if it clashes with anything the CDC or World Health Organization or OSHA or EPA is telling you. All right, a little bit about who we are. Kalo Services was started in 2005. We're a family business, and we do a lot of air conditioning and refrigeration. We work in everything from grocery store air conditioning and refrigeration, which needs us a lot right now, so we're doing a lot of that. A lot of different types of commercial air conditioning, and then we also do residential, only in the West Central Florida market. So those of you in Villages and Claremont, in Winter Garden, those sorts of areas, we've been serving for years and years. Since 2005. In addition to that, I am a contributor to many different trade publications. I have my own website, my own podcast, YouTube channel called HVAC School. So I help to train the technicians and contractors in our industry on best practices. And a lot of it is technical content about actually repairing air conditioners, servicing them, installing them properly, and we give that all out free. But nowadays, we're spending a lot of time talking about indoor air quality. So I figured if I'm talking so much publicly to contractors about indoor air quality, it only makes sense that we take a few minutes to talk to you about indoor air quality and what you can do in your home to make it more healthy and not to fall victim to maybe some incorrect thinking. So the first thing is we want to have some desired outcomes here. This is what we're looking for in everything that we do, and you don't want to do one at the expense of another, and sometimes you can do that with certain toxic chemicals and certain things. So we have cleaner air, obviously, all the way there on the left. We have fewer biological risks, so that goes hand in hand with cleaner air, but sometimes when we think clean, we're just thinking no dust, that sort of thing. Well, biological risks are really tiny particles. We talk about them as being smaller than PM 2.5, and that just means that they're tiny little particles, and those are the ones that are most dangerous. We want better immune function, which that means that not only do we have to think about whether or not you're going to get infected, but we also want to make sure that if you are exposed to the virus, that your immune system is going to be built up and you're not going to be one of the ones that's really negatively impacted. And then here behind my head, we have symptom reduction. So we want to try to reduce symptoms as much as possible, not just as it relates to the outbreak we currently have, but symptoms to just typical allergies, symptoms you get from pollen and dander and dust mites and all those sorts of things. So these are the 4 outcomes we want to try to achieve. Let's talk about these are the different areas we're going to talk about. So in case you're coming in early and you want to know if you want to stick around, I know I would want to know what's going to be covered. We're going to talk about differences between different respiratory contaminants, so different things that are in your air or in your home that you may want to be concerned about. Coronavirus, COVID-19 facts, some things that are often confused about it and often lead to poor decision making. We're going to talk about surface contamination, filtering air, humidity control, ventilation, and neutralizing live organisms. So some of these are specifically, HVAC, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning type topics, and some of these cross over into other areas. Again, I'm not a microbiologist. But I have spoken to a lot of experts over the last few weeks. I wrote a guide and did some podcasts and videos on these topics, and so I wanted to make sure that I was covering them well. So I spoke to some microbiologists. I spoke to some sanitation experts. I spoke to doctors, just a lot of different people in order to get a sense of all the different things that I should cover in a presentation like this and in my articles. So let's go through this list of different respiratory contaminants. And this slide up here shows you the size of some of these different respiratory contaminants and how much they can vary. So the things we can see, like the human hair, is 5 to 70 micrometers. Fine beach sand is 90 micrometers. These things are enormous in the world that we're talking about. So things like dust, pollen, mold, etc., are often in that PM10, 10 microns, 10 micrometers, or smaller. But the really dangerous stuff that can get into our bloodstream and really contaminate our lungs are, here it says combustion particles, organic compounds, etc., but this would also include viruses, so things that are smaller than PM 2.5. And the reason that matters is because a lot of our traditional strategies to filter out this really big stuff, the stuff you can see, they don't work very well on the really small stuff. And so it's important for us to know the difference. Not that there's anything wrong with filtering out the big stuff, because that is absolutely necessary and definitely part of the strategy, but we also want to think about these smaller things. So this list kind of goes from biggest to smallest in general, so it isn't all completely in order, but pollen, dander, dust mites, mold, and fungus, these are larger particles that will often get caught in even kind of traditional air filters. They're just bigger molecules, bigger particles. And then we get down into bacteria and viruses, which is what we're facing right now. But it's key to understand that what we're dealing with today is a virus, not a bacteria. So when you hear people talk about using antibacterial soap, well, think about what you're saying. You're saying a soap that kills bacteria. Is COVID-19 a bacteria? No, it's a virus. So viruses are very small, and they are impacted differently, and they are caught differently, and they're dealt with differently than bacteria. So we have to think about that. And then we get into things that are actually in the vapor state. These are what we call VOCs, and these are the chemicals in your air. So common VOCs would be things like formaldehyde, different aldehydes. Basically, a lot of the things you can smell would be VOCs. So if you walk into a house and you can smell something, that's going to be a VOC. That's going to be some sort of a chemical. Now, that chemical may be of naturally occurring causes. Things like when your dog has an accident, that is still going to release VOCs, but it's of a natural cause. The ones that we're most concerned about in most homes are toxic chemicals. Things like foam rubbers or foams that are inside different types of mattresses or in pillows. A lot of those things can release these chemicals into your home, and they can interact with each other and really create kind of a toxic cocktail. And a lot of the symptoms that people see, or a lot of the increase in symptoms that people see, many scientists are starting to attribute to increases in these chemicals that are very hard to track or trace. There's not really a lot of really good sensors to catch them, and most people aren't tracking for them. And so it's something you really want to think about. Now, these other three are really basic. They're very basic elements of our daily life. So you have carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and O3. Now, carbon monoxide is never good. We do not want carbon monoxide. That's CO. That's the stuff that comes out of the tailpipe of your car. Inside your home, you generally don't have a lot of risk of CO poisoning unless you have combustion appliances. So if you have a gas range, or you have a gas dryer, or you have a furnace in your home, now that's when you really want to think about carbon monoxide as a potential respiratory contaminant. Now, if you have an attached garage, it can be a risk. If, for example, somebody was running the car in the garage, much less of a risk, but still something to think about. Some people still use carbon monoxide detectors even just with an attached garage, but that's generally your only risk unless you have combustion appliances in your home. Carbon dioxide, as you know, trees, breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. We breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. So when we spend a lot of time inside, carbon dioxide can build up and become a problem. And most people aren't measuring it. I'm going to show you some sensors you can use that you can actually get that will help you measure carbon dioxide levels. But when carbon dioxide levels build up in your home, it hurts your cognitive function. You tend to be tired. It's harder for you to think, and it can depress your immune system, or at least there's some studies that seem to show that. And so anytime carbon dioxide levels get above about 800 parts per million, it's something that you want to look at. And the best way to deal with carbon monoxide there. The best way to deal with carbon dioxide, CO2, is dilution. So bringing in outside air in order to dilute that, so that way you can bring those carbon dioxide levels down. Simplest way, open a window, right? And then finally, ozone. Generally not a lot of ozone in the indoor environment unless it's added to it because of certain products, like certain air cleaners do add ozone to the indoor environment. Ozone is not something we want in the indoor environment. It does occur outside. It occurs with lightning storms. There's certain natural events that can cause ozone to be high. And you will notice that people have higher respiratory issues when there's a lot of ozone. And right now, when we're facing what is a respiratory virus, we want to keep everything out of the air that's going to potentially cause respiratory issues. And so O3 or ozone is not something that we want in the air. So that's our list of different things. And as you can see, it starts with the big stuff, goes down to the small stuff. And generally, as things get smaller, they get a little harder to deal with. All right, this is another look at some of the size of things that are on that really tiny scale. So now everything here is pretty tiny, but you up here with different types of tapeworms, big stuff, and then you get into the molds and yeast, and those are a little bit smaller, and then you get into bacteria, which are smaller even still, but then you get down to viruses, and they're really, really tiny. They're actually, many of them, fractions of a micron, and so this is where things like HEPA filtration become much more important to catch those tiny, tiny organisms. All right, so let's talk about coronavirus a little bit specifically. Now, first off, there's a lot we don't know about coronavirus. We haven't had these big peer-reviewed studies done yet because we just haven't had the time to do that yet. But there are some things that we want to think through specifically with coronavirus. And I'm going to get my big head out of the way so that way you can see this a little better. So first off, viruses aren't alive in the same way as bacteria and fungus. It's key to understand. Viruses require a host in order to grow and propagate. So, for example, if you took a countertop and you coated it with coronavirus, they wouldn't grow on the counter. They would eventually die out. Now, how long would it take to die out? There's a big question, right? A lot of different studies show a lot of different things, different surfaces. It's going to die off different times, different temperatures, different light exposures, lots of factors that explain how long it's going to live there, but they're not going to grow there. They're going to live there, and they're going to wait, or survive there, I should say, until a host comes along and picks them up and ingests them. Then, once it gets inside your body, then it can propagate. So people carry the virus, and people are where it grows and spreads, not on surfaces. So this is important to know, because as it relates to things like air conditioning, a lot of people have this false idea that, like fungus, it's going to get into your air conditioner and it's going to infest it and it's going to grow in there. Well, that's not going to happen with viruses. If there are viruses inside of your air conditioner, inside of your ducts, inside of your walls, anywhere like that, they're going to eventually die. Now, what could happen is they could get in there and then they could get moved back out and somebody could pick them up and then it grows inside of a person. That's possible. But just remember that people carry the virus. That's where it grows and spreads, not on surfaces. Coronavirus is very, very tiny, and there's different, obviously we don't have a lot of information right now, but it's a very small virus, and it's hard to catch when you compare it to other particulates. So you compare it, obviously, to dust, dander, mold, bacteria. It's much smaller, so it's trickier to catch, because the only way to really catch something is to run it through some sort of filtration where it actually gets caught up in the fibers. Now, we can do it, and it is done with HEPA filtration, but with typical air filters, it's very tricky. One thing that's really good about the situation that we're in is that at least soap and detergent cleaning works well on viruses. So you do not need antibacterials in order to kill a virus. You need virostats or antiviral products. And there are some products that can deactivate the shell. It's actually a lipid shell, so it's actually made of like a fatty substance with little proteins. And so if you look at this picture kind of in the background here, these red things are little proteins, and then the shell is the lipid shell, and inside there is RNA, which is basically genetic material. So what happens when we use soap or detergent is that it breaks down that lipid shell and exposes that RNA, and the RNA can't get in without these little proteins on the outside. So if we deal with the proteins in the shell, we make the virus, pointless. It can't get inside of us, and if it can't get inside of us, it can't hurt us. It can't get inside our cells, I should say. Good inside our body, but it's not going to get in our cells. And it's in our cells where it does the damage. So soap and detergent cleaning works well on viruses, and that's why the CDC and the World Health Organization are talking so much about hand washing. It's one of the most important things that you can do, but it's also true of washing surfaces or washing touch points, as we call it, things that various people are going to touch and possibly share the virus. Now, also keep in mind that the virus can be sneezed out or coughed out, and these are what we call respiratory droplets. These tiny little balls of basically saliva that the virus is in, and it goes out. Those respiratory droplets can be caught directly if somebody breathes them in, but then as they settle onto surfaces, they also contaminate those surfaces. So it isn't just touch points. We talk a lot about touch points because that's where it's most likely to be shared, but really it's anywhere those respiratory droplets go out. Sanitizing with appropriately tested and rated sanitizers is still a good idea. The EPA has a full list of the rated sanitizers. If you just type in to Google EPA sanitizers, you'll find their list. Keep in mind that a lot of times those aren't the brand names, so sometimes a brand might rebrand a couple times. There's a lot of products that are known to work on viruses similar to coronavirus that aren't on that list. And even then, the EPA is not saying that it does work on it. It's saying that it's likely to, because we haven't been able to test most things on coronavirus. It's quite new. So sanitizing is still a good idea, but soap and detergent is really the main ticket to dealing with coronavirus when it's on surfaces or on our hands. Good masks do help, but medical professionals need the most. You're hearing this all the time. Things like N95 masks work great. At Kalos, my wife and kids and I made a bunch of these homemade masks that actually have a HEPA filter that comes from a vacuum bag on the inside of this. And we're using some of these. We're also using some more simple surgical masks or even dust masks. And when you're using those masks, they may protect you a little bit. It depends on the mask. There's a lot of details. But the main reason you're wearing the mask is to protect other people because, as we know, there's a lot of people who have the virus who don't have any symptoms. And so we don't want, should they sneeze or should they cough or even just through talking, we don't want those to be spread all around. So it's better to keep it contained in a mask. And at Kalos, we've moved to, it's been really tough to find masks, but we found some masks, and so we've moved to making that policy when we interact with customers in their homes to make sure that we're keeping that contained within us, just in case we were a carrier without having symptoms. But again, if you have N95 masks, please donate those to your local hospitals or your local emergency workers because they need those most. Now, you cannot contract this virus through your skin. That's a really good thing. So I see a lot of people wearing Tyvek suits and that sort of thing. That's really unnecessary because you could have your arms completely covered in the virus and it's not going to get into your body unless it makes it through your mouth, nose, eyes, things like that. Here's just another little fact sheet. This is actually, this isn't something that I wrote. This just shows how soap works against the virus, how it breaks that lipid shell, that fatty shell around the outside of the virus, exposing the RNA. And the soap is these little heads with tails, look like little minnows, and the tails are actually attracted to the fatty tissue, and it actually breaks it up, and that's how soap works. And so the biggest thing we do is just, wash things thoroughly, wash your hands thoroughly, use soap. Detergent is just detergent, same thing. Anything that makes suds generally is going to be your best bet. I had a microbiologist tell me that anything that makes suds is probably going to do the job well. Again, you don't need to use an antibacterial. I can if you want. It's not going to hurt as long as it makes suds, but the antibacterial part isn't what kills the virus. That's what kills bacteria. But fortunately for us, COVID-19 is not a bacteria. It is a virus. All right, so here's how you deal with surface contamination. Actually, I'm going to bring my face back in case you forgot about me. Here's how you deal with surface contamination. You wash the surfaces with soap and disinfect with rated disinfectants. That's kind of the 1-2 punch. That if you're in a hospital environment, that's what they're going to do. Some cases they're going to bring in machines like UV machines to irradiate the entire room. And once it's been unoccupied, they have different, obviously, schemes to use. But if you want to be safe, wash it with soap and then disinfect with a rated disinfectant. And that's that EPA list. One thing that's really interesting is that copper, brass, and silver help to kill many microbes. Now, I'm not going to state it across the board because I haven't tested everything, but if you look in the background of this image, you can see this shows the time on surface that COVID was tested to last versus other surfaces. So copper is a really good touch point, so is brass. Good news is a lot of air conditioning parts and coils are made of copper or brass, so the virus isn't going to last as long on any of those if they are made of copper and brass. But something to think about if you're going to be replacing doorknobs or handrails or pools or anything like that soon, I would think about copper or brass because it is going to reduce the life of the virus if it lands on those touch surfaces. All right, things that matter most. I just got to keep saying the things that matter most because when we start talking about some of these other things I'm going to talk about, people will get the idea that those are more important. These are the most important things, and these are the things that the CDC and the World Health Organization talk about all the time. So proper hand washing. Wash your hands really well. Do the thing where you do between the fingers and the back of the hand, where you do that, and then make sure you get the thumbs on both sides. Those are all really important steps in doing a really good job of getting your hands washed. Next thing, keep your distance. Obviously, now that's written into the law. If you don't have an essential job to do that's on the list by the governor, then you need to stay home and just kind of wait it out. Surface cleaning, anything that's a touch point and anything that is likely to have been sneezed on. So when you think of, kitchen sinks and bathroom sinks and faucets and doorknobs and countertops and handrails and pulls on your cabinets, those are all the things that you want to clean regularly. So just basically do what you regularly do, just do it more. And then masks and gloves in certain situations. And those situations are situations where you have the potential of crossing new vectors, which means basically that you're going to be around somebody who you're not around all the time. Your family, if you've got it, they probably already got it, right? But meaning the ones who live in your house. But when you go outside of your home, whenever you cross paths with somebody else, you run the risk of cross-contamination. And the president and others have even said at this point, a mask is a good idea. Even if it's just a scarf, anything to kind of contain your stuff will help prevent that mixing, even if you don't have symptoms. Now, obviously, if you have symptoms, you really shouldn't be out anyway. So masks and gloves are a good idea. All right. It's important to note this, and I have to say this because I am an air conditioning contractor, and some of what we're going to talk about now goes into the realm of indoor air quality. So it's unlikely that coronavirus will survive all the way through an HVAC airstream, that's heating, ventilating, air conditioning airstream, and return to the space as infectious, I should say there, that's a typo, based on current research, which means that, is it possible that somebody could be sneezing up a storm and those viruses could make it into an air conditioner? Well, the answer is yes, of course. I mean, somebody could sneeze right into a return for that matter, and it could make it into an air conditioner, could make it on an air filter. But is it likely that that virus is going to make it into the air conditioner and then turn around and make it all the way out the airstream and make it back into the space as infectious? And the answer is no, that is very unlikely. And so a lot of the things we talk about and a lot of the things that a lot of companies who are really push selling products talk about gives people the idea or the sense that keeping their air conditioner clean and decontaminated is a really big risk factor as it relates to coronavirus or COVID. And I'm here to tell you there's no evidence that that is the case. So that's the best I can say. Who knows? It could end up that we misunderstood some things and it's actually a huge issue. But as of right now, I can't in good faith sell you products that help sanitize an air conditioner with the belief that it's going to make a significant difference as it relates to the coronavirus. Now, other things, molds, bacterias, dander, all that stuff, some of the things that affect your respiratory tract and can also affect your immune system, absolutely. And so I don't have any qualms about talking about things that work well, but I don't want to give you the idea that your air conditioner is going to become contaminated or a cesspool for COVID, because there's just no reason to believe that that is the case based on any study that I've read, and I've done a lot of reading and talking to people over the last few weeks as I've been trying to understand this. All right, let's talk about some air filtering factors here. So this is, when you think about your typical filters in your air conditioner. Denser filters do catch more, but are restrictive to air. And so most of your air conditioners out there can't handle more dense filters. You can't just pull the filter out, the little fiberglass filter you have in there now, slap in something that's a lot more dense, and go about your merry way without having problems with your air conditioner. At minimum, you might have higher power bills, noisier equipment might not last as long, but on the other end, you might actually have some freeze-ups. You may have some real problems with your air conditioner if you take the filter you have in it now and were to put in a higher MERV rating filter. So when we talk about this scale here, this is kind of hard to see, but MERV 1 does almost no good for catching anything, all the way up to MERV 20, which is like a super, hyper, ultra HEPA filter. So MERV 17 to 20 would be considered in the HEPA range, and then these are kind of your good regular filters that you see every day. But I see a lot of customers, they get concerned about these things. They pull out one filter, they just put in one that's a higher MERV rating, and in a lot of cases that's going to hurt your equipment. Now, you must move air to catch airborne particles. There's a lot of filtration technology out there that talks about how well it can capture and kill things, but then when you look at the specifications, it's essentially doing it in a box. It's not doing it with a high airflow airstream. And when you're filtering the air for an air conditioner, that's a lot of air. You're moving a lot of air in Florida on your typical air conditioner, at least you should be. And in order to filter that air, you've got to have a filter that is going to capture it, but also isn't going to be restrictive. But there is the advantage with an air conditioner that in order to catch things from the air, you have to be moving it. So at least you're moving it. A lot of the very small HEPA filters that you put in your room or whatever, a lot of them don't move very much air, and so they don't do much good. In order for a filter to do a lot of good, it's got to move a decent amount of air. It kind of stands to reason. And in fact, I think Oric used to do commercials to that end. They would talk about their air purifier, and he would say, he was an older guy, and he would say, kind of reminded me of Paul Harvey, actually. And he would say, you got to move air in order to clean it. And it made sense to me even when I was a teenager hearing those commercials. PM 2.5 and smaller particles are the most dangerous, and specifically the ones that are PM 0.3 and smaller, because that's what we're talking about with COVID. We're talking about a very tiny particle. And so you've got to be able to capture those really small particles. If you look here, most of you are going to have a MERV 8 filter in your air conditioner. So that's going to be... it's going to capture less than 20% of 0.3 to 1.0 micron stuff, so less than 20% of viruses. When you get up here, it does a pretty good job of trapping the really big stuff, the hair and all that. Now, when you go up to MERV 13, which is about the highest that you're going to get off the shelf anywhere, still filters out less than 75% of the tinies, but it does a really good job at the big stuff. Problem is, generally going to be too restrictive for most air conditioners. When you get up into the HEPA range, which is all the way up here in the dark range, you're not going to be able to put a HEPA filter in a regular air conditioner. So anyone who says that their filter in an air conditioner, regular air conditioner filter is HEPA, there's some kind of silliness going on because these things are so restrictive. They do a really good job. They're going to catch 99.97% of the particles, of those tiny, tiny particles, but they're going to be super restrictive, and you're not going to be able to move. The typical, blower motor on your air conditioner is not going to be able to move through that. All right, so here's the thought about AC equipment filter challenges. Many systems can't handle a more restrictive filter. Sometimes system upgrades must be made in order to accommodate a better filter. So sometimes it's just not an easy thing to do, and you have to upgrade the system. AC systems only filter when the blower runs. So obviously, if the system's off, it's not filtering. Some people will say, well, okay, run the blower all the time. Well, in Florida, we don't want you running the blower all the time because that re-evaporates moisture out of your drain pan and causes your humidity to go up. Now, so in the winter, it'd be fine if you wanted to run the blower all the time. But in the summer, we're really worried about your indoor humidity and your comfort, and so we don't want you running the blower all the time for that reason. True HEPA filtration cannot be installed as a primary AC filter. There's none that I know of in residential where you can install true HEPA filtration as a primary AC filter in a residential air conditioner. All right, there's a lot of different levels of air filtration. This is a picture of using a MERV 13 filter, attaching it to a box fan, and setting that in the room, and using that to filter air. It actually works pretty good at catching, the bigger particles. It's not going to catch a ton of the smaller ones, but it can help. And so if you're on a budget and you want to do something, well, what you can do is go online, find yourself a MERV 13 filter that's about the same size as a box fan, tape it to the box fan. There's a website called Smart Air. I think it's smartair.com, I'm pretty sure. They have all kinds of articles on how to do it-yourself solutions for all sorts of things, including this. And if you're on a budget, it's absolutely the sort of thing that I think you should definitely do. It has value to it for sure. Next thing are your kind of consumer grade air filtration systems that you can buy. You can buy them online. Of course, right now everybody's sold out, so that's probably not an option. But we have the iAdapt Air from Air Oasis. Is a product that we have in our house. It works really good. This is the Molecule. This product I don't like as much as this one because it doesn't move as much air, but still a good product. There's lots of consumer grade room filters, filtration systems that you can use. Some of them have HEPA level filtration, some don't. I'm prone to encourage you to find ones that move a lot of air and are truly HEPA rated. That would be my suggestion. And it doesn't hurt to do that. In fact, especially if you have respiratory ailments or you're very, very concerned about this, I would try to get a HEPA filter for your bedroom at least. So just a freestanding one. Even if you have really good filtration on your air conditioner, I would still do that because it's going to be much more likely to catch those low-level respiratory droplets because it's much closer to you. So again, that's just by way of suggestion. Certainly not something you have to do, but something that I think would be wise if you're really concerned about, especially respiratory ailments. Or you have, if those of you who have allergies or deal with asthma, you definitely want to keep the small particles out of your air in your home. The next thing would be I would put in a quality HVAC filter. And the problem is that putting in a quality filter isn't just as simple. You're not going to just take a filter out and put in a quality filter. It's going to generally be a larger filter, a 4 or 5 inch thick filter. And that's where you can start to use MERV 11 or MERV 13 without it being too restrictive for your existing air conditioner. A good air conditioning contractor is going to know how to interpret these charts to make sure that these filters aren't going to be too restrictive. This chart comes directly from this Clean Comfort filter. This is one of the filters that we use. Very good quality. This one here actually has carbon in it. That's why it's that black color. It's not dirty. And that also helps deal with VOCs and odors. But you have to be able to look at the charts for a particular piece of equipment and make sure that you're not going to overload it with too much back pressure, which could potentially damage the equipment and cause problems and breakdowns. Now, I am a huge fan of true HEPA filtration. Huge fan, as I've already mentioned. It's great. It just doesn't work as a primary filter for an air conditioner, but it can be used in conjunction with a primary filter for an air conditioner. It uses something called diffusion and really, really fine fibers in order to catch tiny, tiny particles. And diffusion basically just means with tiny particles, they kind of bounce all over the place, and so it's not just a direct flow. And as they bounce across these particles, they'll actually get trapped against the particles. And that's what traps these really tiny, tiny things like viruses. And so because of HEPA's ability to catch these tiny, smaller than 1 micron particles, that's why I really like it. And, I like using good quality filters in your regular air conditioner. That's great. But I also really like HEPA filtration, whole home HEPA. Now, be careful. I just want to mention this real quick. Be careful when talking to people about HEPA who are in our trade, because a lot of them don't know what HEPA is. I mean, HEPA stands for high efficiency particle arrestants, and it's a standard that basically says 99.3% of particles, or 99.7, down to that 0.3 micron range. A lot of people will see products that will talk about similar to HEPA or whatever for typical air conditioners, and a lot of technicians, without even knowing it, are telling people the wrong thing, thinking that they're putting in HEPA filters. So you want to look for that actual true HEPA stamp. This is what true HEPA would look like in a whole home. You can install it in parallel with your duct, and so it doesn't do all of the filtration, but it takes a percentage of your air and moves it through the HEPA filter and filters it really well. The nice thing is with this is you can run these all the time and continuously filter whether the AC is running or not, which is nice. And any air that goes through this, generally, around 30%, maybe anywhere from 15 to 30% of the overall system airflow is going through this HEPA filter, and that getting captured is going to really help with symptoms, and it's going to help with things like viruses because it can actually capture most of those within the HEPA filter, depending on the size of the virus, obviously. Humidity control really, really matters. We talk a lot about humidity and how it affects comfort, but it also affects health. So this kind of optimum zone, this comes from ASHRAE. This is the accreditation here. This chart is well known in our industry, and we don't want our humidity to be too low because otherwise that helps the growth of bacteria, viruses, respiratory infections, asthma, and ozone production. If it gets too high, well, now we got this whole bevy of things, bacteria, some viruses, although it doesn't appear that COVID-19 actually grows more in high humidity. It's actually a problem more in low humidity. But then fungi like mold, mites, allergies and asthma, and chemical interactions all happen more the higher you get in relative humidity. So the perfect spot, really, in our market, at least in Florida, is about 50% relative humidity. If you're in a market that has really cold, dry winters, you can't actually go that high for reasons that have to do with the way the buildings are constructed. But in Florida, 50% relative humidity is about what we want, and that means pretty much all summer we have to be doing a heroic effort of keeping humidity out of the home in order to prevent it from rising above 50%. Now, 50 to 60 is generally considered acceptable, 40 to 60 kind of being the optimum zone, but I like to see it if I have my option at 50. But there's a lot of factors that impact humidity, and this is one thing that comes up a lot in our business, is that people tend to blame high humidity on the air conditioner, but there's a lot of factors that are outside of the air conditioner's control. First off, people inside. If you cook, shower, houseplants, pets, these are all things that can add moisture inside the home, and different people live in different houses differently. I have 10 kids, so I produce a ton of moisture inside of our house with doing the laundry and cooking and taking showers and all that sort of thing. Also outdoors, it's Florida, so people who keep their doors or windows open more or have them open more just because they're coming in and out a lot, it's going to be higher humidity in the house. Attic gaps and cracks around vents and can lights, that's a huge cause in Florida. Many vents and can lights in new construction homes in Florida are not properly sealed, and it acts as a kind of a really big straw to suck moisture inside the homes. It can also be true of crawl spaces or basements, but we don't have very many of those in Florida. Drywall ceiling to wall connections can be a gap or crack where moisture can make it in. People who don't run their bath fans long enough. Some people don't run them at all, but some only run them as long as they're using the shower or bath and not continuously. And also having proper kitchen exhaust is another important thing. And that kitchen exhaust needs to go outside, not just recirculate into the kitchen if you're wanting to get rid of that humidity. All right, so here's some things about Florida and that we deal with controlling humidity. An AC can only control humidity when it's running. So if it's not hot enough outside to make the air conditioner run, you're going to have humidity buildup inside. Also, humidity is often high at night when units don't run as much. So you'll notice a lot of times you get uncomfortable at night in bed. You start off feeling fine, but then in the middle of the night you wake up hot. Some of that might be your personal biology, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that humidity inside often increases at night when the system is off. Running the fan in the on position on your air conditioner makes humidity worse. Now, I know some people are going to dispute this. A lot of air conditioning technicians do, but trust me, do your research on this. Running the fan on does make the humidity inside worse because it re-evaporates the water that's in your drain pan into the space, and it also can create pressure differentials that can impact the humidity. Setting the unit colder isn't better due to dew point concerns. So a lot of people try to drop the humidity by dropping the temperature. But the problem with that is that, and this has to do with something called dew point, which is the point at which you actually get condensation. You can actually cause condensation on your ducts and in your attic and in your walls if you run your house too cold. And so some people will say, and this happens to us all the time, people will ask us, hey, I want you to sell me an air conditioner that I can hang meat in the house. I can get it 68 degrees in the house. Well, I can certainly install an air conditioner that can do that. The problem is it's going to cause moisture problems. It's going to cause, those ugly M word that I don't say, but those fungus and things like that to grow inside your walls, on your ducts, in your attic, even if it doesn't happen in your occupied space, which it may. But we don't want you running your air conditioner too cold because it can cause other problems, not because we somehow want to control what temperature you keep the thermostat. In Florida, we have these really high outside dew points that can cause some major problems when people set them too cold, which is why we suggest that you set your air conditioner between 73 and 78 degrees. 73 kind of being the bottom. And some people will say, well, I have to keep it at 70. Well, you can if you want. That's certainly a personal choice, but it can lead to issues. Obviously, it's also going to lead to high power bills, which that's your business, not mine, but it can lead to issues. The solution is supplemental dehumidification. So you can add in supplemental dehumidification in order to take more moisture out of the home. First, you deal with those other things that I talked about, your bath fans and sealing around cans, doing anything else you can do to reduce the moisture that enters the home. But once you've done all that, your solution is supplemental dehumidification. And this one here is a portable. You can start with a portable. That's often a good place to start if you're not sure if you want to make the investment in a whole home. I think that's a great idea to get started, especially in things like a bedroom or areas like that. But you will notice they're noisy. You have to deal with emptying the trays or running drains, and they just don't work as well. They break a lot. So after that, I would suggest going to a whole home dehumidification system in parallel with your air conditioner. Now, a lot of people will say, and you get it all the time, they'll say, well, my air conditioner is a dehumidifier, and that is absolutely true. But remember all of these factors that we already talked about, is that you can only control, sorry, we're going to go here. Air conditioner can only control humidity when it's running. It doesn't run that much at night. It doesn't run that much in the spring and fall. You can't run the fan in the on position because that makes humidity worse. And like we said, humidity is often high at night. So often you're going to find that keeping a fixed 50% relative humidity with a regular air conditioner is just impossible. Some of you have setups in your homes and types of systems that are better than others, but I would challenge any of you to put a sensor in and see if you can keep your relative humidity right at 50% under all conditions without using supplemental dehumidification. All right, ventilation. When we talk about ventilation, I'm specifically talking about bringing in air from the outside. Now, we talk about, a lot of people will call it bringing in fresh air. Well, the air is not always fresh from the outside. In Florida, it can be quite humid, and it can have some contaminants in it. So we don't always want to bring in more outdoor air than we need to, but bringing in some is important because of these reasons. It helps decrease CO2. So that's that carbon dioxide buildup because we're breathing inside of our homes, especially when we're staying in them for long periods of time. Again, easiest way, open a window. You can do that. Now, it's going to bring in humidity with it, so there's some challenges, but that's the easiest way to ventilate. Also, ventilating dilutes VOCs and airborne particle concentrations. Now, in order to do it well, so as a professional, the only way for me to bring in outdoor air well is to filter it and humidity control it. If I just bring in outdoor air and I dump it into your air ducts, it's going to condensate. It's going to cause all kinds of nasty growth. We see it all the time. A lot of builders had to comply with the new laws and just started dumping unconditioned outdoor air into returns, and it caused some serious problems that we're still finding today. So if you're going to bring in outdoor air, it's a good idea. Don't bring in too much, and filter it and humidity control it. And the only way to humidity control it is to run it through a dedicated dehumidifier or something called an ERV, which is very rare in Florida. It doesn't generally make a lot of sense for our market. It's called an energy recovery ventilator, but that is another way you can do it. Be careful, like I mentioned, because bringing in outdoor air can cause more problems than it solves in Florida if done improperly, because we got a lot of stuff in our air and it's very humid outside, and hot too. So those are all factors. So removing chemicals. We talked about chemicals in your air. Those are really big factors. This is not specifically about COVID, but anything that affects your health inside can affect your ability to fight the virus and to just generally be healthy in your homes. And as we're spending so much time in our homes, this is important. So removing VOCs, airborne chemicals, is tricky. There are a lot of purifiers that send oxidizing molecules out into the space, but they are not well tested. My reference for this is the EPA Residential Air Cleaners Guide, and this is the link right here. I have this on a couple slides. So you can just Google EPA Residential Air Cleaners Guide. And they're going to talk about this. A lot of these systems that people talk about that send ions or send molecules out into the airstream, and they go out and they neutralize the nasty stuff in the air, they're not very well tested, and there can be unintended consequences of oxidizers, according to some studies. There's a study done by Berkeley that talks about some of the unintended consequences of putting these molecules out into the air that then you could breathe, or you could breathe some of the compounds that they create due to these chemical reactions. So be very careful with that. I don't suggest doing things like, spraying air fresheners or essential oils in your air, not just because those can get into your lungs and cause problems, but because those can combine with other chemicals and create toxic cocktails. In general, in our homes, we want our air to be just air, regular old air, oxygen and nitrogen, a little CO2, a little argon, just pure air. That's what we're designed to be breathing in, not a whole bunch of other stuff. And so if you see a lot of other things that talk about adding stuff to your air and that being good, I would just ask for the studies, do your research. If you feel comfortable with it, that's perfectly fine in your decision, but I would always just be very careful with that. And there are cases where it makes sense. Just to be clear, there are cases where some of those products do make sense, but just be very careful. I'm really a big fan of activated carbon or charcoal. It is a proven technology. It is on the list that does have standards and is well tested by the EPA. It has some challenges, but the nice thing with activated carbon is that not only does it deal with VOCs and odors, but it can also deal with O3, which is that ozone that can be a problem sometimes on the inside as well. So this is really hard to read. This is the standard from the EPA Residential Cleaners Guide, and it talks about adsorbent media, which catches gases. This is the category that the carbon filters or charcoal filters fall into. And the good part is it has potential for high removal efficiency from many gaseous pollutants in air cleaners with a sufficient amount of media for the application, and there's no byproducts. So adsorbent media like carbon or charcoal doesn't create nasty byproducts. The challenge is that regular replacement is required because its adsorption capacity is exhausted, and physical adsorption is a reversible process, meaning pollutants may be permanently captured. So you capture stuff into a carbon filter, it's not permanent. Effectiveness of many consumer-grade systems with small amounts of activated carbon is unknown. So the problem is that some people will say, hey, we put activated carbon in this, but it's not much and it doesn't do much good. And there's high pressure drops on some of them. There's different removal efficiency for different gases, and the standard test methods are not widely used. So there are standard test methods, but they're not widely used. So good thing about carbon is that there's nothing bad about it. It's not going to hurt anything. Bad thing is got to change it, and some people say they're using it when they're not using much of it. So these are the less standardized and tested solutions. You're going to notice all three of these have no specific testing. There's no specific way to test them that's across the board. That's this catalytic oxidation, which involves things like PCOs, and there's some that talk about hydrogen peroxide or different things that supposedly they create. When I say supposedly, they do create, and I'm not saying they don't work. They're just not well tested. The good thing is they can degrade a wide array of gases. They can be combined with adsorbent media to improve effectiveness. So if you use these with carbon, they can actually be pretty effective, and we're going to talk about that. The downside is they can generate harmful byproducts, such as formaldehyde. There's no standard test method. They're often relatively low removal efficiency for many indoor gases. Lack of field studies. Catalyst often has a finite wide lifespan. So a lot of the fancy products that claim space-age technology, so on and so forth, are going to fall into this zone or to this zone. Plasma has a lot of the same concerns as catalytic oxidation. And then intentional ozone generation is a real no-no. We don't want ozone in the homes. We know that it is it can be an irritant, and it's not always an irritant. And there is an EPA standard of how much ozone you can have in the home, and most of them aren't going to cause more than that. So it's not like it's like they're doing something illegal, but a lot of products out there do generate ozone and put ozone into the home. And in fact, many of these products do produce some ozone. It's not intentional, but they do produce some ozone. So that's something to watch for. Air quality monitoring is really wise. These products are products that we are in the process of testing. The technology keeps getting better really quick. AirThinks is one of the best out there that I've seen recently. Full disclaimer, we're only in the testing phase on this. We have not installed these. If you called us today and asked us to install one in your house, we probably wouldn't be able to. But this is something you can buy it online. You can install it yourself just in your home, and you can look at things like formaldehyde levels. You can look at things like what your CO2 levels are in the home, what your VOCs are, what your particles in the house are, and it gives you a really good idea of whether or not things that you're doing in your home are actually working or not. I'm a really big fan, if you're going to do anything, to look at what it was before, look at what it was after, so you have a sense, is it working or isn't it working? Again, let science and data lead the way, read studies, and then also do your own monitoring if you can. Carbon monoxide is a silent killer, like I talked about. Anybody who has things that burn fossil fuels or even gas fireplaces, please get a low-level carbon monoxide detector. You can buy this online. Just takes a battery, you mount it on your wall anywhere. It doesn't have any wires or anything, and it lasts for several years. This is going to measure low levels of carbon monoxide. Typical carbon monoxide detectors are not going to start to alarm until you get over 50 parts per million up. And that's a condition that you have already been made sick by carbon monoxide. So you could potentially have a home that's running 30 parts per million carbon monoxide in the house. People are getting sick, having symptoms. It's triggering asthma, all this sort of thing. You have a carbon monoxide detector. You expect that it would go off, and it doesn't. And that's just because of the way that current UL ratings are. Find a low-level carbon monoxide detector. Put it in a common area of your home. It's just mental insurance. You're not going to buy this from me. Just go buy it, find it online. This Defender one is available a couple places, including a company called True Tech Tools, which is a very really good company. I know the founder. But these are good products that are going to help with peace of mind if you burn fossil fuels in your house. If you don't burn fossil fuels in your house, meaning you don't have a gas dryer, gas stove, gas range, any of those things, then don't worry about it. But if you do, all my family members, I tell them to get this. I don't have one in my house because I don't have any fossil fuel appliances. All right, so it gets a little controversial here, but when you have to neutralize live organisms. So we say neutralize because in viruses, they're not alive to begin with. You don't kill viruses because they're not alive. They're just genetic material. So they only become alive. They only propagate because your body gives them the energy to do so. They live off of your energy. They sap your energy. They use your cells to replicate themselves. They're real jerks like that, viruses. But you can irradiate viruses, and that means that you render them useless. So you compromise their outer shell or the proteins on their outer shell, and now they can no longer infect your cells. So UVC, that's UV lights, can work well to irradiate surfaces, and it's well proven. We know it's well proven. It's being used in hospitals right now. It's being used all over the world to irradiate surfaces. Can it be used to irradiate air? Can it be used to kill viruses in the air? Yes, but the residential ones don't do that very well. The residential UV lights that are being sold do not do a good job of irradiating the air as the air flows by. There are people who will dispute that, and I would ask them to show the specific studies with specific feet per minute or CFM standards and show kill rates on viruses similar to COVID, such as SARS. You're going to have a really hard time finding those studies. There are some really weak bacteria that can be killed easily, and those are the ones they usually focus on. But I would really be careful believing that UVC or UV can kill viruses in the air itself. It's going to do a really good job of killing it on surfaces, and that's what it's used for today in hospitals and a lot of different applications. O3 works, so O3 is ozone, so it does work. It actually is an oxidizer, and it will kill things in the air and deal with VOCs, but it causes respiratory harm, so it should be avoided. We don't want to use O3 inside of our homes in order to help kill things because it can also hurt us. Filters catch, but they don't kill. So even HEPA filters, they're going to catch, but they're not going to kill. But you don't need to kill as long as they catch, right? As long as they're catching the live stuff in there, you know, it eventually will die on its own, at least the viruses will. And so that's what we're concerned about right now. And so you just change them periodically. Fungus, bacteria, and viruses all behave differently, like we talked about. You deal with fungus, which is molds and things like that, mildews. They tend to grow in these damp, dark places, and they grow. Funguses grow. Bacteria will grow or propagate, meaning you'll put some there and you'll go back and you'll have more of it. You look in a petri dish, right? You see a little bit of it, and then you go back and there's a lot of it. It'll actually grow outside of a host. Viruses do not grow outside of a host. They grow within a host, and they spread outside of a host. So they get caught because they spread, because you cough them out or touch something, and they spread to other people. But you're not going to have a virus, you know, sitting on a countertop and come back a month later and have it still be there. Now, again, that's based on everything I know right now, right? And in most cases, it's only going to be a matter of hours, depending on what the surface is, how much light there is, what the relative humidity is, all those factors. And I can't tell you what that is. But eventually, that virus will be rendered no longer infectious. Things like PCO, AHPCO, APCO, air scrubbers, Remy-Halo, hydroperoxides. Some of those words are trademarks, but I'm just educating you. They all use oxidizers, and none of them are currently subject to standardized testing as it relates specifically to the wide range of their operation. There are specifics, so some people will have them tested for ozone. For example, one of these things here, APCO, APCO, that is a product that we sell because I think it's a really good product. But just know that it's tested by them and by labs that they hire. It's not tested by somebody like the EPA. There are no test standards currently for those products. So that's something to think about when you're looking at those types of products. Okay. What comes next are our preferred solutions based on our experience and research, not objective data. Now, some of it, there is objective data, but some of it is my opinion. And so as we get into this next section, I want to tell you that, and I want to give you the chance. If you want to shut it off and you don't care about solutions that we can offer, then shut it off. You've learned plenty. Hope you enjoyed it. I want to be really careful that when we talk about these next things, some of these are things that we can do for you, and I want to make sure that you're clear that when I do that, I'm disclaiming that. And because I'm an educator, I teach for the industry. This next part are things that we actually do because I think they are the best options. But it does have a, I don't know, I guess you could say a sales aspect to it because these are services we can provide. Now, some of them are not currently available because of shortages. Some of them are available. All right, so here's our recommended solutions for a healthier home. These are non-HVAC related things. These are things you can just do in your home right now. Reduce toxic chemicals stored inside the home. That will reduce the VOCs inside the home. So if you take things like your bleach and all the nasty cleaners that you use, ammonia or, all that stuff, take it and put it in the garage. Store it there outside of the occupied part of the home or in a shed. That's going to be less likely that it's going to spill or maybe somebody's going to get into it, an animal, one of your children, whatever. Practice CDC recommended practices for hand washing and distancing. This is one of the biggest things right now. These two are really the two biggies. These don't cost anything or cost very little for you to do, and these are the ones that you need to be spending the most of your time on and thought into. Next, seal the home envelope better. So that means things like around can lights and around the boots where your ductwork comes in and all the gaps and cracks into the attic. By sealing that all up better, you're going to control humidity entering. You're going to control dirt and other things that some fungus can feed on. So you want to seal the envelope of the home. That's something we can help you with assessing. You want to run the bath fans longer or use humidity-controlled fans. They make fans now that go on and off by themselves based on the humidity in the bathroom, which is a nice feature that we can show you and talk to you about. Vent your kitchen exhaust outside. If your kitchen exhaust is vented inside and you cook, you want to vent that outside. I would look into venting that outside. That's just a good thing to do because it's exhausting a lot of those chemicals that happen because of cooking, and then also that moisture. If you don't ever cook, well, then who really cares, right? But if you are somebody who does cook in your kitchen, then you want to make sure that vent is exhausted outside. Consider copper or brass knobs, spools, handles, and faucets. Next time you got to replace your doorknob, think about brass. Probably not going to be cheap to get good, real brass knobs. Maybe look for antique ones. I don't know, but I'm certainly going to. Next time I get knobs, I'm going to look at brass or copper because this stuff just doesn't live as long on those surfaces. And not only that, I like how it looks. So there's that. All right. Here's some HVAC-related upgrades to consider. UV to irradiate and deactivate live organisms on the evaporator coil. That's mostly going to be fungus. Is it possible that some viruses could make it through and you just want to play it safe? Sure. And can it deactivate them on that surface? Absolutely. The evaporator coil can get very nasty. It's cold, it's wet, it's dark. Putting a UV light shining on that, it's like shining high intensity sunlight on it. It needs to be UVC because we don't want to produce any ozone, and so some of the other older UVs did produce ozone, so you want to make sure it's the right UV. But it can definitely help irradiate that coil, and irradiate is the right word, not eradicate. My wife proofread this for me and thought that that's what it was, but that means that it uses radiation to kill. Consider using high-quality media filter for the equipment to filter small particles. So that's a good quality, one of those MERV 11 through 13 filters. That's one of the big, thick ones. Sometimes it installs easy. Sometimes it takes a little more work. Just depends on your application. Humidity control via portable or permanent dehumidifier. I'm a big fan of separating dehumidification, so your air conditioner can dehumidify, but it doesn't have to take the whole load. This is a very specific to Florida and really humid environments thing, but I have a dehumidifier in my house. That's how much I believe in it, in addition to my air conditioner. I would consider putting HEPA portable air cleaners in the sleeping room or rooms if you're concerned about it. Regardless of what else you do, that's a pretty easy one to do. HEPA whole home bypass filter to catch very small particles in the entire home. That's going to be one of the best strategies for actually catching viruses in the airstream if you're concerned about that. But it will also do a good job with other stuff, your dander and your dust mites and your pollens and all those other things if you have allergies. Ventilation air brought through a ventilating dehumidifier. So if you go with a whole home dehumidifier, you can bring in a little bit of outdoor air through that dehumidifier, which can then help to filter it. And then I always double filter that air. So I filter it outside with a really loose filter, and then I filter it again when it goes through the dehumidifier before it goes into your airstream with your air conditioner, because outside air can often be very dirty and full of all sorts of stuff you don't want in your airstream. So those are things to think about. I also suggest, as an option, the APCO X with carbon to deactivate live organisms and reduce VOCs in the supply airstream. So this is a product, and this is a product that, of the products that are a PCO, it concentrates its PCO, it concentrates its ions onto a carbon medium. And so that goes back to what the EPA said about how you can use adsorbent materials in concert with PCOs in order to increase their efficiency. That's what they're doing. It is a certified by Underwriters Laboratory zero ozone air purifier, which is very rare. There's very few that can claim that. A lot of them will make their own claims, but they don't have a UV stamp. Not UV, UL stamp, Underwriters Laboratory stamp. And so that's why I'm most confident currently with this product. It isn't to say that there aren't other products that will install, because it isn't a moral issue. People can choose to use different products if they like. I just want our customers to know all of the options as we learn about them. And this is a product that I've recently learned about, recently spoke to the founder, and it's the one that I'm currently most confident in. And then regular AC maintenance that includes maintenance on the indoor air quality solution. So if you do any of this stuff, you need to make sure that whoever you use to do your maintenance also knows how to maintain this stuff and is going to include that in it. That's a really important part. Again, we already talked about sensors, but these are the brands of sensors that I would suggest looking into. So you can pause this and look these up online if you want. AirThinks, IQ Air, or Haven from Tazoa is how they say that. They all function a little differently, but they all have good reviews, and they're all going to be pretty darn accurate. And then a low-level CO sensor, the Defender, the one I showed you already, is available from TrueTech Tools Online. These are just sensors I suggest that you go out and get, especially if you're going to invest your money in this sorts of technology. You want to know that it made a difference. And we can help you with it if you want, but I definitely suggest that you do this, whether you choose to do anything, don't choose to do anything, choose to do one thing. In any case, it really helps you to know where you stand. All right, so here's kind of our Mac Daddy solution. This is what a typical air handler looks like. This isn't a furnace, but a big media 4-inch air filter rather than using the small one underneath. A ventilating dehumidifier, sorry, that's cut off there, but a ventilating dehumidifier to bring in outdoor air and also control your humidity 24 hours a day. A bypass HEPA filter. This one's duct mounted, but there's also some that would be ducted. Just depends on the application. Ventilation air with a damper. That would actually go through this in this configuration, but that's your outdoor air. And then you have a coil UV light. So this UV light shines on the coil. Isn't going to do much for killing stuff in the air itself, but it's going to do a lot for killing anything that gets caught on the coil. And that coil's wet and dark, and so it's just a good thing to do. And then finally, the APCO X in the duct, which is going to help deal with odors and VOCs and also act to just assist in purifying the air as part of a whole solution. Now, you can do any one of these separate from this whole solution, because this is a lot. This is a big investment. But you can pick the one that you think suits you best, or you can start monitoring your air using a sensor, figure out which one you're most concerned about, and then start to address those individually. And that's it. So you can find out more on our website, Kalos Services, but also HVAC School. It's hvacrschool.com. That's my website that I produce for the industry. That's where you can see our podcasts, videos, all that stuff. Those are all things that I give as resources. I'm going to move that there so you can actually read it. We have free, no obligation virtual consultations that are available by either texting or calling this line. And that just means that you're going to talk to one of our customer service representatives. They're going to get your information, and then they're going to put you in touch with me, our general manager, or one of our other technicians. We're going to call you, and then we're going to talk to you. If there's something you want us to look at, we have a thing on the phone called Google Duo, where you're going to actually show us what's going on in your air conditioner, show us where it is and all that, so that way we can give you some advice But that's all it is. And then if you are in a position where you want to use one of these solutions, then great. If not, that's also totally fine. And I also suggest if you already have a contractor and you're happy with them, you can use this as a way to ask them for maybe some of these solutions. And they can always reach out to me on HVAC School if they have questions. I help contractors all the time. So I want to always make that available to you. Right now, we all need to hang together more than we ever have. It's really important that we're looking to serve one another where we can. Obviously, a lot of us are locked in our homes, but at Kalos, we're going to be available. If you need us for anything, just give us a call, text us. This line works for regular service calls as well, and we'll be happy to help. And we do have some masks and gloves and all that, so our technicians are going to have those on the truck when they come out. If you have any questions or any concerns about anything that I've said here, you want to talk to me about it, feel free to call or text that line, and one of our CSRs will get you in touch with me directly. All right, thank you so much. Again, my name is Brian Orr with Kalos Services and HVAC School. It's been a pleasure. Stay safe out there and have a wonderful day.